On the night of December 25, 1776, George Washington packed roughly 2,400 frozen and hungry soldiers into rowboats and pushed across the ice-choked Delaware River in the middle of a brutal winter storm. Waiting on the far bank, more than 1,000 Hessian soldiers were still recovering from their Christmas festivities in Trenton, New Jersey, with no clue an attack was coming. Washington's strike force overran the town in under an hour and a half. Over 900 enemy troops were captured, and not a single American soldier died in combat. One of the most one-sided wins of the entire war. Yet this wasn't a desperate gamble from a general with nothing left to lose. It was the first visible move in a long-term strategy so unconventional that the British military, despite being the most powerful fighting force on Earth, never managed to counter it until the war was already lost. Back in 1775, the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia had handed Washington a near-impossible assignment, command of the Continental Army. On paper, that title sounded significant, but in reality, the army was a patchwork of regional militias with no shared training, no consistent supplies, and no dependable funding. Washington had fought in the French and Indian War 2 decades before, but nothing in his background had prepared him for an opponent like this. Britain's advantages were enormous: a navy of more than 270 ships, professional troops trained since boyhood, officers educated at Europe's top military schools, and enough money to hire roughly 30,000 German mercenaries, primarily from Hesse, on top of its regular forces. Washington, meanwhile, commanded farmers, tradesmen, and teenagers who had never aimed a musket at another person. Many of his men enlisted for periods as brief as 3 months, and once that term ended, they simply went home, regardless of what was happening on the battlefield. Picture trying to win a war when your army disappears every season and has to be rebuilt from nothing. Early defeats confirmed every worry. The Battle of Long Island in August 1776 turned into a disaster. British General William Howe flanked Washington's roughly 10,000 troops from several directions and nearly pinned the whole Continental Army against the East River at Brooklyn Heights. Had Howe pushed forward that same evening, he might have wiped out the rebellion entirely. Instead, a thick fog settled over the river overnight, and Washington quietly organized an evacuation. Using every available boat, he moved 9,000 men along with horses, cannons, and supplies across to Manhattan in roughly 9 hours, undetected by British sentries stationed less than 600 yards away. By the time the fog cleared, the Americans had vanished. That escape rescued the revolution, and it taught Washington the lesson that would shape his entire strategy going forward. He could not defeat the British in open combat, not with these numbers, this training, or these resources. So he stopped trying to. Historians often describe what Washington did next as a Fabian strategy, named for the Roman general Fabius Maximus, who wore down Hannibal not through direct combat, but by avoiding it, cutting supply lines, harassing foragers, and letting time work against the invader. Washington adopted the same logic. The Continental Army didn't need to win battles, it needed to survive. Every extra day the war continued, cost Britain enormous sums, and chipped away at political support back in Parliament. The British needed a fast, decisive victory. Washington only needed to avoid losing, and time was on his side. So rather than seek glory in open battle, Washington retreated again and again, across New Jersey and into Pennsylvania, until even his own officers wondered if he intended to fight at all. British commanders mocked him in their letters home, and Loyalist papers in New York branded him a coward, predicting the rebellion's swift collapse. Soldiers deserted in droves, frustrated by months of marching away from the enemy. But Washington was watching the British make exactly the mistake he was counting on. After seizing New York, the British scattered their forces across New Jersey into isolated posts, confident the rebellion was nearly finished. General Howe headed back to New York for the winter social season, and the Hessian garrison at Trenton grew so relaxed that its commander, Colonel Johann Rall, reportedly ignored a local loyalist's written warning about an approaching American attack, pocketing the note unread to return to his card game. That decision would cost him his life, and 900 of his men. Washington timed the Delaware crossing for Christmas night, betting correctly that the Hessians would be deep in holiday celebration. 2 of 3 planned river crossings were blocked by ice, leaving only Washington's column of 2,400 men to make it across after a grueling 9-hour fight against the current. They reached the New Jersey shore around 3 a.m., far behind schedule, then marched 9 miles through a snowstorm, some men barefoot, leaving bloody tracks in the snow, 2 dying of exposure along the way. Despite losing the cover of darkness, Washington pressed on, and his 2-pronged assault caught Trenton completely by surprise. Rall was shot attempting to organize a defense and died of his wounds. His garrison surrendered en masse. Barely a week later, Washington pulled off an even bolder trick. British General Cornwallis marched over 5,000 men to crush Washington's force at Trenton, found the Americans dug in behind a creek, and decided to finish them off in the morning. Overnight, Washington left a small detail behind to keep the campfires burning and dig noisily, fooling Cornwallis into thinking the entire army was still camped there, while the real force muffled its cannon wheels with cloth and slipped away on back roads. At dawn, Cornwallis attacked an empty camp. Washington had already marched 12 miles north and struck the British garrison at Princeton, leaving Cornwallis thoroughly outmaneuvered. Trenton and Princeton reignited the revolution's morale, but Washington knew the war's underlying math hadn't changed. Britain was still richer, stronger, and in control of every major port. He returned to his patient strategy, picking fights only on favorable terms. The winter of 1777 to 1778 brought the war's bleakest stretch at Valley Forge, where roughly 12,000 men endured crude log huts, scarce food, and rampant disease. Around 2,000 soldiers died there from starvation and illness rather than combat. Yet that same winter, a Prussian officer named Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben, speaking through translators, drilled the ragged troops into a disciplined fighting force, transforming amateurs into soldiers capable of matching European regulars. Alongside the battlefield, Washington ran an extraordinarily effective intelligence operation on almost no budget. The Culper Ring, a network of ordinary civilians operating inside British-occupied New York, used coded names, ciphers, and invisible ink to pass messages, including intelligence gathered by a Manhattan shopkeeper named Robert Townsend, who simply listened to British officers talk over drinks. Washington also weaponized disinformation, planting fake troop reports, and building decoy camps that sent the British chasing threats that never existed. That deception reached its peak in 1781. With Cornwallis dug in at Yorktown, Virginia, Washington needed to move his army 350 miles south without alerting British commander Henry Clinton in New York. He built a fake camp in New Jersey complete with massive bread ovens, staged boats as if preparing to invade Manhattan, and let forged attack plans fall into British hands. Clinton took the bait and held his forces in New York, while Washington and roughly 4,000 French troops under Rochambeau raced south. French Admiral de Grasse sealed the Chesapeake with 28 warships, beating back a British relief fleet and trapping Cornwallis completely. The 3-week siege that followed was relentless. French and American artillery pounded the British works day and night, and on October 14th, Alexander Hamilton led a bayonet charge that captured a key redoubt in under 10 minutes. A last-ditch escape across the York River was scattered by a sudden storm. On October 19, 1781, more than 7,000 British troops marched out and surrendered. In London, Prime Minister Lord North reportedly repeated, "It is all over," and he was right. Washington never outfought the British. He lost more battles than he won, and surrendered nearly every major city they wanted. But he understood that the war was never about holding ground. It was about outlasting an empire, deceiving its commanders, and making every mile so costly that Britain's own public eventually refused to keep paying for it.